when I switched or expanded, I should say, from being just trying to make beautiful pictures to I just realized I was out on a mural one time, and I had headphones on. I was listening to headphones, listening to music, and somebody came and wanted to ask me a question about the work. And I took my headphones off and had a conversation. And the conversation was a good one, where I felt like I was connecting with this person. I was helping this person understand the art that I was making. And I just had this inspiration like, don't wear your headphones anymore. You're here to answer these questions. You're here to have these conversations. And ultimately, I realized that's as much a part of my art as making the painting. You know, I'm making the painting, but my it's also my work to love these people. It's the same. It's not different. There's not the painting and the conversations. It's all the art. That's all the artwork. And it's all about putting love into the public. And from that point on, I didn't wear headphones anymore.
Hey, spiritual artists, I want to thank you for listening to my podcast and supporting me this year. It has been a great year. I just want to remind you of two things. First, I have a book called The Spiritual Artist, and it is on Amazon. It's the perfect gift for an artist in your life. It's a great stocking stuffer, something you can take on an airplane as a gift. So I encourage you to buy the book and share it. And second, I wanted to let you know that I'm planning my second spiritual artist retreat in North Dallas. It's a great experience. I just got done with one about 4 weeks ago. About 12 people getting together, sharing spiritual ideas and artwork. I can't think of a better combination. So check it out. It's listed on my website, spiritualartisttoday.com. You can read about it. You can download a brochure that talks about what you get for the price and how much fun it is. Thanks again. I look forward to sharing all these wonderful tips and tricks with you in 2024. Can you believe it? Have a great holiday and talk to you soon. Bye. Good day. You're listening to the Spiritual Artist Podcast. This is Chris Miller, your host. I have a return guest today on the podcast, and I am thrilled to have him. Alex Cook was one of the first people that I interviewed probably about 2 years ago, and we had such an engaging conversation. He was actually probably one of my favorite interviews. So I am so excited that he's coming back to the show, and I'll tell you why and how I ran into him here in Dallas, Texas. But let me give a little bio. He is a multidisciplinary artist, and he lives in Boston, Massachusetts since 1997. He has created over 240 murals in 22 states and 6 countries, which is amazing. And in 2014, he created the You Are Loved mural project. We're going to talk about that today, and that's how I kind of ran into him. He also has written and recorded 5 albums of original songs. You can find him on Spotify. I've listened to some of his music. I love it. And he performs around the US. Most recently, and we're also going to talk about that. I have a copy of it with me. He released a book, You Are Loved, Spiritual and Creative Adventures and Memoir. We talked about this in the first interview, and I just have it at hand because it's a great book, and I encourage you to get a copy of it. He is an avid basketball player and collector of art books. So good morning, Alex. How are you doing?
Morning. Great to be here, Chris.
I was so thrilled. So I'm going to share this with the listeners. I was on Instagram and I saw a post, and I follow you and I follow your murals, and I'm like, wait a minute, he's in Dallas. And I was like, and so I messaged Alex something and said, hey, why don't you tell me you're coming to Dallas? And he responded and said, well, I'm here and I'm still painting. Let's meet. So I was thrilled to come down and see you at work. Is it Thanksgiving Square? Is that right?
Yeah, that's it. Yep, right downtown.
Yeah, I want to talk to the listeners about this and about your whole, I'd call it your ministry of murals, your mural ministry. I don't know if you like that term or not, but
Sure. Yeah.
yeah. So I went down and we met for dinner and had a great conversation. And Alex has this whole campaign. And so tell me about it. I'm going to get some of your pictures off of Instagram, and I'm going to slide some of your murals over this interview so people can see them if you're watching this on YouTube instead of listening to it. But Alex, tell me, you did a little different thing here, right? It wasn't the You Are Loved concept.
Yeah. So I was working with this organization, Thanksgiving Square in downtown Dallas, that has a really beautiful mission of using their space. It's an actual park right there in downtown, but it's dedicated to focusing people's thoughts on the idea of gratitude. Um, it's just a really amazing and pretty individual organization. I don't know too many organizations out there that are like that, that have a space that's dedicated to a particular virtue, you know. And so they have different programming and works of art and quotes up all over the place that are meant to, you know, when you're down there, focus thought on gratefulness, gratitude, forgiveness, and all kinds of other virtues like that, and also actually inclusiveness, kind of a sense of embrace around people of all types. Anyway, they have a space that they have a rotating mural on that, you know, changes every couple of years. Um, and they asked me, knowing that I did text murals, they asked me to make a mural of the phrase "love people," which was really fascinating for me because, you know, I do "you are loved" again and again and again and again, which is wonderful, and I love to do it. Uh, but it was really fun to get the variation, both in meaning and in a sort of nerdy way. The just the difference in the letters, the different angles and curves that the letters in "love people" have is different than the same things in "you are loved." Um, so it was an 11 by 55-foot mural that we had 40 community members who came and helped paint in the we have a community participation element in the murals that I do. So now it's finished and you can see it right down in Thanksgiving Square.
Okay, there's so many wonderful things about that. I love it. So I love the concept of an organization promoting gratefulness. I love that.
Yeah.
And I love the how you've done this whole mural project. So I also want to share with the listeners the idea of an artist doing something with their art that changes the world like that. So tell me, you know, at first show them you had that poster there about the technique that's used on the mural. You
Oh,
just lifted up.
right.
Explain this
So
concept to them. Yeah.
so I've been over the last few years, I've been just in my own explorations, developing this uh, kind of geometrical painting using colored lines. It's been an exploration of color and contrast and pattern for me. This is one. I'll do it this way so you can see it better.
Yeah.
Just a little example of the kinds of things I've been doing. If you can imagine, in the same way that these diamonds go over these circles, um, the diamonds went over the letters in this mural. So there's a sort of the words are all written out in this big blocky style, you know, 11-foot tall letters, and then these diamonds are going over the whole thing. Which was actually, this was the first time I had the opportunity to use that particular design in a mural. I had done lots and lots of paintings here in my studio, but this was the first time that I had the chance to do it at such a large scale in public. Which, you know, anytime you do something completely new, especially if it's in public, um, was a little bit. I was not nervous, but just like kind of excited. Boy, I hope this comes out right. And thank goodness it did.
Well, you know, they always say, I just read something about you're not really being an artist unless you're like reaching just a little higher than your comfort zone. You know, you're always reaching just a little higher than your comfort zone. So this is the first time you did that diamond pattern on a mural?
Yeah,
Oh, wow, how neat. It looks great. Looks
thank you.
great.
Yeah.
And so I love that conversation. I was talking to Alex that night. We walked down and looked at his mural, and of course he starts talking, and I'm like, wait a minute, I want to record this. So you're talking about the whole idea of how you merge shapes with abstract, and the idea that the type was actually simplified almost, you know, to almost the basic shape. So
Yeah.
can you and it does have a three-dimensional feel to it. So explain that a little bit.
Yeah. So, I've been doing these You Are Loved murals for 10 years now. And in order to keep my artistic interest, I made a resolution long ago that they were going to change. They had to be, each one had to be different. I really knew that I wanted to be learning and exploring as I was making them. And one of the evolutions of that exploration was, whereas the letters began in sort of linear typeface, over the years, I arrived at a simplification of all the letters where the capital A just became a triangle. And the O is a circle, and the V is just a upside down triangle. To where all the letters have been simplified just to the degree that they can be and still be the letter, um, just to geometrical shapes. And at that point, it became clear to me, oh, I'm really just dealing with curves, angles, lines, uh, color, pattern, composition. These are really just purely formal elements. We just happen to have agreed as a culture that this set of curves and lines has a meaning. Like when you put these curves and angles together, it's a word, and that word has meaning. But the curves and angles themselves are just curves and angles. So that was very fascinating to me to realize, oh, I'm actually just making purely formal compositions, um, that are there are some absolutes that there are some that are dictated by the letters, but beyond that, I really have just total freedom to um, make an abstract painting as long as the words are still legible. um, I can just make an abstract painting, uh, which was fascinating and has uh, given me endless elements to explore over these years.
Yeah, once again, so many things. So I love that. I do want to share that with the listeners because I think that's a characteristic of what I call a spiritual artist. You're always moving ahead. Every painting, every piece of work is a stretch into a different experiment. You're trying to take it further. And so the fact that you mentioned that when you started this whole mural project, you decided that it would always be moving. Because there's people that would do the exact same, they would do the exact same thing over and over again, but you're letting it evolve, right? And in a way, it's evolving. It also has its own story, right? I'm sure you're trying to. You can't really control that, right? It kind of tells you what it wants to evolve to a little bit, doesn't it?
Well, I don't want to control it. I mean, that's the whole thing there. If you're controlling it, you're staying inside your own little closed circuit.
Yeah.
But if you're not controlling it, you are allowing in new ideas that change the work, that change you, that force you to explore. And when we talk about getting, beyond the comfort zone, I think there's an order of operations. Like if I think to myself, I need to get outside my comfort zone, and that's the motivation, for me, that's the wrong order. The order is I need to be interested in something and follow my fascination, follow what I'm trying to learn. And that moves me outside my comfort zone. Getting outside the comfort zone is the effect of my desire to learn. It's not my first stepping stone. I'm not thinking I need to get outside my comfort zone because then I might just be uncomfortable.
Right.
There's no inherent virtue or progressiveness in being uncomfortable or miserable. Uh, it's just in service of the thing that makes me feel great, which is learning and exploring and expanding my creative horizons.
I love that. I love how you clarified that. Thank you. You always move me ahead. you know. So I wanted to share something. I grabbed the book this morning because I want to talk a little bit about this idea that you've created this. Is it a nonprofit? I mean, have you formed a separate nonprofit for this mural
No,
project?
no,
No.
this is just me as an artist making my way.
That's interesting because you could, right? I mean, you could actually turn that into a nonprofit, but you get people support you and people They
Hmm.
pay for these murals, right?
Yeah, yeah. It's been something that I thought about every now and then over these 10 years. Would it be better for the project if it were a nonprofit? Um, and ultimately, things were moving ahead fine as they were. I do have a thing set up where I have basically what's called a fiscal sponsor. So if somebody wants to make a donation, especially a larger donation, they can do it through that. So it will be tax deductible. But I'm not uh, a nonprofit per se, but I do have this fiscal sponsorship that allows me to receive tax deductible donations.
I just thought of something. It was kind of fun. I want to repeat this to the listeners. It was in the intro. He has done 240 murals, and that's just amazing to me. In 22 states, and I think Alex, you should set a goal to hit every single state.
It's
I
sort of been the implicit goal from the beginning, uh, really just as a pipe dream 20 years ago. And we're not halfway there after doing 20, working for 26 years. So we'll see.
Well, I was going to say, you know what? You should send me a map where they're color coded, and we'll put that in this video, and people can see what states you're missing because it could be that easy. It's just that easy.
That's a great idea. I'll take you up on
All right, send me a map, and I'll put it in here so people can say, "Hey, he's not in my state."
that.
And so what happens? So you find an area. Explain this process to our listeners. How do you people come to you and say, "Hey, I want a mural in this area"? How does it work? You know.
At this point, that's basically it. I have my website, I do my social media, I have my email list, and I put my social media and my website on every mural that I make. So the hundreds and ultimately thousands of people that are going to see this Thanksgiving Square mural, they will all have access to follow my Instagram, go to my website urlovedmurals.com. Um, so, all during the year, I'm receiving uh, inquiries through the website. I'm the principal of an elementary school in Southern California. I run a shelter in Kansas City. Run a church in Georgia, and they're all interested in "You Are Loved" murals or some variation thereof for whatever reason they may have. Over the years, long ago, it was a whole lot more of me hustling and getting out in the world and going to meetings and making phone calls and those sorts of things. Um, but in terms of getting the work, I'm happy to say that after 26 years, it's more people coming to me.
Yeah, that's nice, right?
It is. It's really nice.
So let me ask you to clarify this. Let's talk about, you talked about why people would seek you out because it says you are loved. Let's talk about your side of it. Why is that important to you to say that to the world?
Well, I mean, it's real simple. I think that feeling loved heals people's lives. Uh, so much of the suffering that we all do is based in one sense or another of not feeling loved. And it's not really like a mural that says you are loved is going to convince you, but I do think that it's kind of a reminder, and especially that's where linking it with art makes a big difference. It would be it's one thing to type it out in black and white on a piece of paper that say you are loved. That's fine, that's a lovely message, but it's different when, like this mural, it's 11 feet tall in a public place and has all of my uh, years and passion and desire for art undergirding the message. um, the color and the design and the beauty invested in it. um, I have faith that gives the message a greater authority and a greater gravity than it would have if it was just a piece of paper that you found blowing through the blowing through a park. That's the power of art. um, Color and design and decision making and all these qualities that we invest in our work that make the message um, uh, easier to feel, uh, maybe more difficult to escape feeling it.
Right.
Um, I really feel like giving it this authority is I use art to make it more difficult for people to roll their eyes at the message. I don't want these the 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 danger is that it's going to feel cheesy, like a Hallmark card, or but my sense of that is things are only cheesy when they're insincere, and I'm sincere, and I'm demonstrating my sincerity with the art, that all the qualities that I invest in these murals, um, that I hope make it more difficult to escape the truth of the message that I'm trying to get across.
I'll tell you, Alex, I could listen to you forever. So I love that. I do think there's something about that, though. The idea of you are loved is a moving statement for someone to see when they're walking through a plaza. And I think you mentioned that on one of your Instagram posts that people come up to you, right? And when you're painting, and they're already reacting to the message and what you're doing.
There was an awesome one in Thanksgiving Square this a couple weeks ago when I was working on this. I was probably 3 or 4 days into the project. It's visible. The words were there. Love people, and a woman came up to me and uh, very quickly jumped in, and she said, "I've been trying to decide whether or not to forgive someone in my life." I was like, "Wow, this woman opened up quick." And
Yeah.
that's a cool thing about talking about something so intimate as love in public, um, is it kind of opens the door. It presents an invitation to people that says, we're here, we're talking about love. And if somebody wants to talk about love, they often feel free to jump right in. So she said she was deciding whether or not to forgive somebody, and basically indicated that this mural had pushed her in the direction of doing it.
Wow.
Uh, and that was so cool. And I just said, boy, thank you so much. Um, and then I forget what she said, but it was she expressed some kind of uncertainty about, like, but I kind of don't know how, or like I'm scared about it or something. And I just felt this impulsion inside me of, like, say something supportive. And I said, you know, whatever efforts you make in the direction to forgive are going to help the world, is what I said. And she just smiled real big and said, thank you, and left. And I just felt like, wow, that was a good interaction. That was really, really solid. And I felt good about the thing that I said too. It wasn't like, well, you better forgive him, or, like,
Yeah.
like, you know, uh, but I just felt like the thing that came out of my mouth, I could stand behind, and I felt like it was true. Anyway, the next day she walked by again, um, this time with a friend, and she just looked by and she smiled at me real big, didn't say anything, and I smiled back at her, and that was it. Um, but those are the kinds of interactions that you pray for. The, it's always, for anybody who's investing themselves in work to help people. It's really um, it's really comforting when you see little pieces like that, little lights, uh, right there in the real world.
Yeah, I think it is amazing. It's certainly validating, and I love what you said. Like you said, you didn't chastise her and you didn't shame her. You just said what any even the thought. Honestly, even the thought of her forgiving the person is moving consciousness in the right direction.
Mhm. Well, and I thought of my own times when I could relate to her uncertainty about her ability to forgive. I can think of plenty of times when I was hurt or angry or in the middle of trying to forgive, but still not feeling it. And that's painful. Those are painful situations. So I was only feeling supportive of her, and I know it's a thing that we often don't um, have control of the pace of how those things go, but I know that it's right to do it. I know that it's healing, um, to actually do the forgiving. So I just wanted to be in support of that without making her feel any kind of pressure or negativity.
Yeah, I mean that is, it's wonderful. I think we all have that. It does help you, but even that obviously doesn't shift a lot of people. There's situations in your life where you feel hurt so badly that it is hard to forgive. I've tried to do that in my life, but there's times where, and unfortunately for me, a lot of times it's with family members or something when I was young, when I was very young
Mhm.
and vulnerable. Um, but it is a wonderful thing. And I think the idea of something, this, love people, it kind of shifted your message a little bit there too, right?
It really did, and it was fascinating to see. I think love people hit her very differently than you are loved would have hit her. Her thing was about loving someone else.
Right. Right.
Um, so you never know how those things are going to change the effect that it has, but I certainly just have faith that with a message so simple and so pure, uh, the outcome will be good.
Yeah, it's wonderful. I wanted to share something in your book because I'm going to say this again to the listeners. This is a great book. I really enjoyed reading it, and it's got heartfelt stories. So much of this book is like little stories. Like you could just take the one little story, and listen to it. But this is about the campaign here, and I swear this morning I asked Spirit, where I should start, and I'm going to talk about that in a minute. If there was something in this book we needed to share, but this is about the murals, and you said this when you were thinking about the concept. This is way back and you said, when I got home, I began to make sketches for murals where the entire content would be the words, "You are loved." I dreamed, what if you could do it in a downtown intersection where thousands of cars and pedestrians pass daily? What if the letters could be 12 feet high, towering over the people, asserting themselves by their sheer size? This is the best part. What if you could just declare love confidently, defiantly, beautifully, right there in front of everyone? That's amazing. So how does that feel, Alex, when you declare love in front of everybody? You've done 240 declarations of love.
Uh, it feels amazing. Um, Certainly years ago, it was more kind of mind blowing to me when I was first doing it. Um, and to be clear, the 240 is my whole career. The You Are Loved project is just the last 10 years. I think
Okay.
there are 115 maybe of the You Are
Wow.
Loved murals. In any case, it's still plenty. Um,
Yeah.
uh, and it felt wonderful. It felt like I had walked through a door. There was the before world and the after world. This after having painted a You Are Loved mural, I was a different person. um I was the guy who agreed to speak about love in public. uh I was no longer kind of like a private citizen in a way. I mean, I am, but like,
Yeah.
I had agreed with myself that this is what I'm going to do. And the the thing in us, or the thing in our culture, that says this is too intimate, or this is embarrassing, or this is too private, or things like that, were not true to me anymore. Certainly felt them as I was walking through the door, felt that resistance. Um, but I think my years of mural painting and desire to express love in public up to that point, and all the battles I had fought uh, to get to that point, gave me the wherewithal to know that this was the right thing to do. This was my actual path. Um, and the voices that say it's too intimate, it's embarrassing, you're gonna make a fool of yourself, were not true. Um, those voices had definitely tripped me up in the past, and there had been big, long, drawn out battles, mostly inside myself, to have the courage to do whatever was um, the thing that the the adversary was trying to keep me from doing. Um, but a lot of those battles had already been won. So walking through that door to create the Your Love project was mostly a pretty peaceful, authoritative progression. And since doing it, it's the real joy has been to see how naturally it's been embraced by so many people and organizations. It's made me understand, and I think I said this to you a few times when I was in Dallas. I've just witnessed that right under the surface, in so many people, there's just this really idealistic, lovely, childlike, natural desire to share love, to recognize the presence of love. Um, and what the project does is it just gives people a vehicle to do that. Um, it didn't have to be a mural. It could be a song. It could be, a poem, whatever. But in my case, it's murals that are very public, and it gives a school or a shelter or a business or a faith community a way to say, look, this is what we believe in. This is what we want to focus our community around. Um, so that's the thing that has brought people to embrace this project, this message, this art, um, which has been, a revelation to me to see, that I think the world gets, and for good reason, a reputation for being a grouchy, nasty, gnarly, dark place.
Yeah.
And that's true in all these ways. But we often pass over the sweet, childlike idealism that is just abiding right under the surface in so many people. Uh, and people just need an invitation to join in, to share it, to be shown maybe that it's safe, that it's going to be okay, that it's worth doing. So that's been very gratifying to me to witness just all this love. It's just right there in the schools, faith communities, the businesses, the social service organizations, the youth organizations, just the public. People are there. They're their sincere, honest, sweet selves that are often have a little veneer of armor or some kind of defensive covering. But that goodness is just right there, right under the surface, waiting to be drawn out.
Wow, I think that's so inspirational to everybody listening to this. It's been a rough couple years. I think we're hearing about all these terrible things happening across the planet. A lot of just a lot of terrible wars and fighting, and so it seems small, right? Or I would say that, but the power of your thoughts, I always believe, is much stronger than any action. Really, the thought moves so many things, and putting these into words and putting them out in public, it does really change so many people. I don't even know if you realize how many people you are affecting and how important it is, like you just said, to give people the ability to let down that armor a little bit and say, yeah, we do believe that you are loved. We believe that we should all love all people, right? We should
Mm-hmm.
love all people. There's more people out there that believe that. When you watch the media, we want to we it kind of feels like it's all angry, hateful people about the separation and blame. But I think there's many more people, like you just said, that just believe that everybody should have a right to live their lives, to love
Mm-hmm.
each other, to be loved, and to
Yeah.
be loved, right?
And the truth is that plenty of those people that are out there doing angry, grouchy, divisive things are the same people that have that love right under the surface. It's not two groups. We can create a culture. When you create a space where it is safe and normal to be loving, you invite people to be loving. When you create a space where it's normal to fight and hate and be threatened, those same people are going to fight and hate and be threatened. So, what culture are we going to create? Uh, it's about initiative. It's about being the first one to say, I'm going to create a space where I recognize the good in you. People that are getting recognized for being good are much less likely to get in a fight
Yeah.
um, than people who are being recognized for their flaws, their faults, their temperamentalness, all of that.
I love what you said. I want to share. This is in your book. We didn't talk about this, but you spent some years ministering to people in prison. Is that correct?
Mhm.
And I love the idea that you really do see the God in everybody, Alex. I mean, you're right. Those same people just need to be that invitation, that culture of love, and it can be turned through art, you know.
Mhm.
Um, I would,
Absolutely.
yeah, I'd encourage all the listeners of this podcast, every artist, because we have people from many disciplines, to think about that when you're doing your next piece of work. How can I make it more about love and inclusivity and kind of shift that culture,
Mhm.
in a loving manner, right? Like you said, it's not about attacking I and them or anything at all. It's
Mhm.
about all. It's about all of us,
It was a real transformation in my work, and this was probably between 15, 20 years ago now, um, when I switched or expanded, I should say, from being just trying to make beautiful pictures to I just realized I was out on a mural one time, and I had headphones on. I was listening to headphones, listening to music, and somebody came and wanted to ask me a question about the work. And I took my headphones off and had a conversation. And the conversation was a good one, where I felt like I was connecting with this person. I was helping this person understand the art that I was making. And I just had this inspiration like, don't wear your headphones anymore. You're here to answer these questions. You're here to have these conversations. And ultimately, I realized that's as much a part of my art as making the painting. You know, I'm making the painting, but my it's also my work to love these people. It's the same. It's not different. There's not the painting and the conversations. It's all the art. That's all the artwork. And it's all about putting love into the public. And from that point on, I didn't wear headphones anymore. I haven't done it ever again, um, because I wanted to be available for those conversations. And that absolutely transformed my work. And I could feel inside myself. It went from, I had my little light bulb of, creative expression, and it got so much brighter because I embraced this idea of people being an opportunity to make my art versus them being a distraction from making my art.
Well, that is fantastic. That's such a wonderful story. I had a solo show this summer, and I tell you, you're right. Just being present while people were experiencing the show, and then answering their questions, it was wonderful. It was wonderful to hear how it affected them, what feelings they got from it, how it moved them, whatever healing they had, because the show was up and down emotionally. People
Mhm.
it was trigger. It was meant to trigger people, but it was meant to trigger people in realizing that these emotions are flowing through you. They're not who you are, but you need to acknowledge them. You need to feel them. You surrender to them. And so literally every 10 feet, someone was real happy, but then they'd feel really sad and then really angry and then really reverent and then kind of lazy. And so I kind of took them through the whole thing. But you're right, being there and in those moments, like you talk about the woman walking up to you and reacting to your work, it's all part of it, right?
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's I have to bring this up because that conversation triggers something we talked about in our first interview, and I would encourage anybody listening to this to go back and listen to the old interview. Um, I loved how you talked about this, and I think I brought it up when we had dinner the other night because I did this whole concept on emotions, and I wanted to show how they flow through you. But I remember in the first interview you talking about how you realized that emotions do propel you to create. you know you can ride that wave, whether it's a wave of happiness or anger. You can ride it and create something. But you talked about how you started to consciously choose which emotions you wanted to experience when you were making art. Does it
Mhm.
trigger? Do you remember that?
Yeah, yeah, I sure do. Um, yeah, it began again many years ago. I had been a very emotion motivated artist. Just like you said, if I was feeling joyful, my painting would be joyful. If I was feeling angry, my painting would be angry, um, etc. With all the whole spectrum of emotions out there. Um, but there was a point, basically, I went through a deep and terrible depression for several years where I was still making art. Um, but ultimately, I found that the feelings were so bad that they couldn't generate art. They were like I was trying in the way that I knew to use my feelings to make art, but the feelings were like ash. The art died as I was making it because the feelings were nothing. They were lifeless. They were death.
Wow.
Um, and I found that it was basically I want to keep making art, but how the hell do I do it? Because the one thing that I thought was what made good art is gone, is no longer in service of art. It's like the anti-art of these feelings.
Oh yeah.
And I found that I had to start. Uh, it sounds so facile and glib to say this, and it's not. But to direct my feelings, to choose my feelings. And again, like I said, it can sound when you're feeling depressed and somebody says, "Well, you can choose your feelings." You're like,
Yeah.
"Yeah, right." But I will just say it was one of the hardest things that I ever did in my whole life. Um, but did happen. And it was motivated because I wanted to stop feeling terrible. You know, that's basically the long and the short of it. And there was tons and tons and tons of prayer that went along with it about how to have the authority, how to feel strong enough to direct my thoughts. And ultimately, obviously, I'm just giving the very greatest hits here. It was a matter of, in a very inward way, turning away from that voice that just wanted to consume me with darkness. And it was spirit that was there in the absence. When I turned away, what was here was just spirit that had just been waiting there calmly, unperturbed the whole time. And I could turn back here and look at death if I wanted to. And I did sometimes. And then I wished that I didn't. And I would turn back. Uh, and the amazing thing was, spirit was just providing amazing, fascinating images to make art, to make paintings of. I found that I just had this. It's actually a chapter in the book. It's called Fountain of Ideas. Um, and that's what I felt that I found, this fountain. It's just fountain of ideas that had literally nothing to do with my feelings. It made me feel great, made me feel wonderful to engage that fountain, to make those pictures, to listen to its voice, the images that it was providing me. Um, it was not fake at all. That was the big problem. I thought the only good art comes from telling the truth. Good art comes from honesty. And I thought, well, if I'm sad, I have to tell a sad story because that's the truth. But it turned out it was just a little bit, not a little bit, it was a lot different than that. It was more nuanced. There's just more to life. We are deeper beings than emotions. That's the truth of the matter. We are more than emotions. Um, Emotions can sometimes lead us to that deeper place, but sometimes emotions are a blockage to that deeper place. Um, and to me, the whole thing is, if God is the source of all these good things, I just want to find what spirit is saying. And sometimes that's going to be right in line with what I'm feeling. And sometimes that's going to be really different than what I'm feeling. And in those cases, I have to be willing to um, give up what I'm feeling, abandon what I'm feeling in service of my greater desire to make good art, be a better person, see more of the truth, just grow. Um, I don't think it works to fight for emotion in and of themselves because they're flawed. Sometimes they're great and sometimes they're not great. The thing that's always great is spirit. Uh, and so we find ourselves negotiating emotions. And sometimes we want to fight like hell for those emotions, even when they're not right. And
Yeah.
it's just something that humans do. Um, and we get so mad. You know, we want to be right. But sometimes we're just, if we believe that God is there, if we believe that there's this wise, loving, pure, fantastic source of good ideas, knows more than we do, which I do. If it knows more than I do, sometimes if I'm thinking something stupid, it's going to be right and I'm going to be wrong. And the difficult times that honestly invariably lead to growth is when we're willing to let let it be more important to learn and expand and grow than it is to be right. Uh,
Mm.
and I think that uh, that's that navigation of emotions.
Wow. Alex, I can't even respond to that. It's so wonderful. I'm gonna have to re-listen to this podcast a couple times and just ponder it. I'm really gonna let myself ponder that concept. I love it. I love it.
Thank you.
And it's so funny. Only when I was doing this project, because I decided, oh, after the fact, when I talked to you, this whole idea of demonstrating that emotions aren't who we are, that was the point of it. But then I remembered in the middle of it, I was like, oh, I remember that conversation with Alex when he's talking about when you're right. You can go in the studio and you can slam something out that's really dark and heavy because that's how you feel. But you can also choose where you want to go. And so I'm just going to ponder it. I can't even, listeners, I can't even sum it up. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I just want to say to me, and I can't imagine a person for whom it wouldn't be like this. It is a navigation. It's not just something you can decide to do uh, and just be perfect at it. This is the work of human life, navigating how we feel and getting to spirit. You know, uh, there's a wilderness of misleading feelings, thoughts, and ideas that we find ourselves in. It's the world. Um, and we have to be so patient with ourselves because we're going to mess it up. But that patience, that mercy that we have towards ourselves, um, is what allows us to learn from our mistakes. Um, and honestly, just get so tired of bad emotions that we're willing to abandon them. Uh, and it takes a great humility, which I think we start to hunger for as we progress. Start to hunger for that humility to be willing to lay down those things that are not serving us and take up those sometimes more difficult things that are serving us to make the actual progress that makes us bigger and deeper and more capable of contributing.
That's wonderful. This is a great podcast as we go into the new year for people kind of to reset and recalibrate and think about. Um, is there anything else that we haven't talked about that you'd like to share with the listeners about your work um, that we haven't covered? We've covered some great things here.
Yeah, no, I think this has been great. I feel satisfied with what we've said.
Yeah, I do too. And like I said, I really do have to ponder some of these things. There's level, like you said, there's levels of that, and it's a wilderness, you know. Um, I would encourage the listeners also. It's a great book. You Are Loved: Spiritual and Creative Adventures. There's a lot of stories in there to follow. I'm going to get that map from you, and we're going to overlay
Yeah.
that. So, because my goal, well, we'll let Spirit's goal be to fill that map up with a mural in every state. You know,
Oh, I just love that.
I do. I
Yeah.
think that would be wonderful. And it's been great having you back. And
Chris,
next,
I have one more thing I want to say now
yeah,
that you
good.
mention it. Um, I don't want the last thing I say to be this assertion of wilderness. I want
Okay.
the last thing I say to be that we navigate the wilderness with our eyes on spirit. That is the light. We're not just lost. We're not lost. There are plenty of things that make us feel like we're in this wilderness, but the guide, the North Star, is love. It's all the virtues that we know. Uh, Courage, creativity, honesty, forgiveness, all of them, the whole pantheon of virtues are out there to be lived and experienced. And those are God in our daily experience. And with those things, we are never lost. The
I,
world can be confusing, and I just didn't want to say we're in the wilderness. Okay, bye.
no, you know
No.
what's funny? I don't think that. I will go back to the whole concept of your mural campaign. When you tell people you are loved, you're telling them that, right? You're not
Mhm.
saying you're lost. That your mural campaign is it's a wilderness. Good luck. It's this affirmation. It's all good. It's all well. You're loved. There is a system behind all this. There's a system
Yeah,
of perfection in place. And
I like that.
yeah. So I think I don't think you've left them that way. I love it. And I love that clarification, you
Good.
know. So all right. Well, I'm sure next time you're in Dallas, you gotta let me know.
That's
But
right.
I love this interview and I love chatting with you. And it was great seeing you at work and seeing your creativity and people he had in the bio here. There'll be description. He's on Instagram. You can follow Alex on Instagram, everywhere else. Keep up with where he's going. But I want to thank you for being on the podcast.
Thank you so much, Chris. It's been so fun to be here.
It has been great, and I wish you a happy new year. And how many more murals we have to get? We'll get there.
Thanks so
All
much,
right,
Chris.
all right.
Happy New
Take
Year.
care.
Bye.
Thanks again for listening to the Spiritual Artist Podcast. Whether you're watching this show on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Play, or iHeartRadio, make sure you choose the subscribe button so that you will receive updates when new segments are released. Most importantly, be still, listen, and know that you are a spiritual artist.